Emily and Jack had been searching for a place to call their own for months. The stress of city living had taken its toll, and they longed for a quieter, more peaceful life. When they stumbled upon the old Victorian house on the outskirts of a small, quaint town, it seemed like fate. The house was grand yet affordable, with its ornate gables and sprawling garden whispering promises of tranquility and a fresh start. The couple fell in love with the house instantly. Despite its age and the eerie aura that seemed to cling to its shadowy corners, Emily was enchanted by the high ceilings and the intricate woodwork, while Jack was drawn to the vast garden that had once been meticulously cared for but now lay in wild disarray. It was perfect for them, or so they thought. The first few days were filled with the excitement of moving in and the exhaustion that comes with unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. The house, however, was not without its quirks. The floorboards creaked underfoot, the windows rattled in their frames, and there was a persistent chill in the air, no matter how many logs Jack threw into the fireplace. The locals had been surprisingly tight-lipped about the house's history, offering only vague comments about its colorful past. Emily brushed off their reticence as small-town superstition. She was determined to make the house their home, filling it with warmth and love. But as the sun set and the shadows lengthened, the house seemed to take on a life of its own. Whispers echoed through the hallways, barely audible yet distinctly unsettling. At first, Emily chalked it up to the house settling, but there was something about those whispers, an almost human quality, that sent shivers down her spine. One night, as Jack dozed off beside her, Emily lay awake, listening to the strange symphony of the old house. She heard the whispers again, clearer this time, as if someone or something was trying to communicate with her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she strained to make out the words. But just as suddenly as they started, the whispers ceased, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Emily dismissed it as her imagination running wild. Yet, deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. As the days turned into weeks, that seed would grow, nourished by the increasingly strange and inexplicable events that would come to haunt their new home. It wasn't long before the strange occurrences in the house became more frequent and harder to ignore. Emily and Jack tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the unease that had settled over them was palpable. The first truly unsettling discovery came one morning while Jack was pruning the overgrown garden. Hidden beneath a tangle of vines, Jack uncovered a small, rusted metal box. Intrigued, he called Emily over, and together they pried it open. Inside, they found a collection of old, yellowed photographs and a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The photographs depicted various people who had once lived in the house, their expressions somber and haunting. Emily felt a chill run down her spine as she leafed through them, recognizing the background as their very own home, albeit in a much earlier time. The letters were even more disturbing. They were love letters at first glance, but as Emily read through them, she realized they contained increasingly desperate pleas for help. The writer spoke of strange noises in the night, of feeling watched, and of the presence of something malevolent in the house. The final letter was unfinished, the words trailing off mid-sentence, as if the writer had been abruptly interrupted. Disturbed by the discovery, Emily and Jack decided to delve into the history of the house. Their initial inquiries at the local library revealed little, but an elderly librarian, Mrs. Whitmore, offered some insight. She spoke in hushed tones, her eyes darting around as if fearful of being overheard. "The house you live in has a dark past," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Many years ago, it belonged to the Winter family. Tragedy struck when their youngest daughter, Clara, disappeared without a trace. Her body was never found, and the family moved away shortly after. Since then, strange things have happened there. Families move in, but they never stay long." Emily and Jack were skeptical. but the weight of Mrs. Whitmore's words lingered. That night, as they lay in bed, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than ever. Emily's heart raced as she listened, and for the first time, she could make out distinct words. "Help! Find me!" Terrified, Emily shook Jack awake and told him what she had heard. Reluctantly, he agreed that they needed to do something. The next day, they decided to explore the house more thoroughly, hoping to uncover any hidden secrets that might explain the strange phenomena. In the attic, they found a small locked door that neither of them had noticed before. With some effort, they managed to break it open, revealing a cramped, dusty room. Inside, they found a child's toys and a faded photograph of a little girl with a hauntingly familiar face. It was Clara Winter. The discovery left Emily and Jack deeply unsettled. They couldn't shake the feeling that Clara's spirit was still in the house, trying to communicate with them. Determined to find answers, they continued their investigation, not realizing that the true horror was yet to come. As days turned into weeks, the unsettling incidents in the house only grew more frequent and more intense. What started as faint whispers and subtle movements escalated into full-blown terror. Emily began experiencing vivid nightmares, where she found herself wandering through the house, following the ghostly figure of a little girl. These dreams were so realistic that Emily would wake up drenched in sweat, her heart pounding, convinced that Clara was trying to show her something. Jack, on the other hand, started seeing shadowy figures in the corners of rooms, fleeting glimpses that disappeared the moment he tried to focus on them. The whispers grew louder and more coherent. It wasn't just Emily hearing them anymore, Jack could hear them too. They seemed to come from the walls, the ceiling, and even from the very ground beneath their feet. Objects in the house began to move on their own. Chairs would scrape across the floor, doors would slam shut, and lights would flicker uncontrollably. It was as if the house itself was alive, reacting to their presence. One evening, as Emily was preparing dinner, she heard a loud thud coming from the basement. Summoning all her courage, she grabbed a flashlight and descended the creaky stairs. The basement was cold and damp, the air thick with an oppressive silence. As she moved the beam of light across the room, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Scrawled on the wall in what looked like blood were the words, "Help me." Emily stumbled back in horror, dropping the flashlight. In the sudden darkness, she felt a cold hand brush against her arm. She screamed, bolting up the stairs and into Jack's arms. Her story of the basement sent chills down Jack's spine, and he decided that they had to leave the house immediately. Desperate for answers, Emily and Jack contacted a psychic medium named Eleanor, hoping she could help them communicate with the spirit of Clara Winter. Eleanor arrived the next day, her presence calm and reassuring. She conducted a seance in the living room, asking the spirits to make themselves known. At first, nothing happened. But then, the room grew cold, and the candles flickered violently. Eleanor's eyes rolled back, and she spoke in a voice that was not her own. "She is here. She is scared. She needs your help to find peace." Eleanor guided them to the attic, where she said Clara's spirit was strongest. There, Emily and Jack discovered a loose floorboard. Beneath it, they found a small, dusty diary belonging to Clara. The diary revealed the tragic story of her disappearance. Clara had been playing hide and seek when she accidentally locked herself in the small hidden room in the attic. Unable to get out, she had died of starvation and dehydration. Emily and Jack were horrified. They realized that Clara's spirit had been trapped in the house, seeking someone to uncover the truth and give her the peace she desperately needed. With Eleanor's help, they performed a ritual to cleanse the house and free Clara's spirit. The terrifying incident ceased, and the house returned to a semblance of normalcy. Emily and Jack, forever changed by their experience, moved out shortly after, leaving the house behind with a newfound respect for the unknown and the unexplainable. After discovering Clara Winter's tragic diary, Emily and Jack were determined to understand the full scope of what had happened in their home. They wanted to ensure that no other spirits remained trapped and to gain closure on the horrifying experiences they had endured. This led them to dive deep into the history of their house and the surrounding area. Emily spent countless hours at the local library, poring over old newspapers, property records, and town archives. She discovered that the house had a much darker past than they had initially realized. The property had changed hands numerous times over the decades, with many previous owners reporting strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena. Emily found articles from the early 1900s detailing the mysterious disappearance of Clara Winter. The reports were scarce, but they painted a picture of a once happy family torn apart by tragedy. Clara's parents, overwhelmed with grief and guilt, had eventually moved away, leaving the house abandoned for years. Further research revealed that Clara's disappearance was not the only dark chapter in the house history. Over the years, there had been several other unexplained deaths and disappearances. In the 1950s, a young couple had moved into the house, only to be found dead in the living room months later. Their deaths were ruled as carbon monoxide poisoning, but rumors suggested something more sinister. In the 1970s, a family of 4 had rented the house, only to flee in the middle of the night, never to return. They left behind all their belongings, and neighbors reported hearing screams and seeing strange lights in the house on the night they left. Emily and Jack began to see a pattern in the stories. Each incident involved someone, often a child, encountering something in the house that terrified them to the point of leaving, or worse, dying under mysterious circumstances. It became clear that Clara's spirit was not the only one trapped in the house. The dark energy seemed to have lingered, affecting anyone who dared to live there. Determined to cleanse the house entirely, Emily and Jack consulted with several paranormal experts and historians. They learned that the land the house was built on had a history of violence and tragedy dating back to the early settlers. It was believed that the site had been a battleground where many had lost their lives, and the residual energy from those events had imbued the land with a malevolent force. With the help of a renowned paranormal investigator, they performed an extensive cleansing ritual. This involved burning sage, chanting protective incantations, and placing protective symbols throughout the house. The investigator also suggested leaving offerings for the spirits, acknowledging their presence, and asking them to move on peacefully. The ritual was intense, with the house reacting violently at times. Lights flickered, doors slammed shut, and a cold wind swept through the rooms. But by the end, the oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the house seemed to lift. The once dark and foreboding rooms felt lighter and more inviting. Feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief, Emily and Jack finally felt at peace with their decision to leave the house. They packed their belongings and moved to a new home, carrying with them the lessons they had learned and the respect for the unknown that had been instilled in them. Their time in the house had changed them forever, but they were hopeful that they had helped bring closure to the spirits that had been trapped there, especially Clara Winter, whose story had touched their hearts so deeply. As the final night in the house approached, Emily and Jack were both anxious and relieved. The cleansing ritual seemed to have lifted much of the dark energy, but there was still an unsettling feeling that something remained unresolved. On their last night, a storm raged outside, the wind howling and rain pounding against the windows, mirroring the turmoil that still lingered within the house. Around midnight, Emily woke up to the sound of whispering. She looked around and saw a faint, ghostly figure standing at the foot of their bed. It was Clara. The figure was clearer than ever before, her face a mask of sorrow and desperation. Jack woke up too and saw the apparition. Instead of feeling fear, they felt a strong urge to help her find peace. Guided by an unseen force, Emily and Jack followed Clara's spirit down to the basement, where they discovered a hidden door they had never noticed before. Behind it was a small, dusty room filled with old furniture and a peculiar chest. Clara's spirit hovered over the chest, her hand reaching out as if to point towards it. Opening the chest, Emily found another diary, more detailed than the one they had found earlier. This diary contained Clara's last desperate entries, revealing the truth about her disappearance. Clara had been hidden away in this secret room by her parents, who feared that she was possessed. They had kept her there, hoping to protect her and themselves, but it had ultimately led to her lonely death. Reading Clara's final, heart-wrenching words, Emily and Jack felt a profound sadness. They realized that the restless spirit of Clara had been trying to tell her story all along, seeking closure for her unjust end. They vowed to give her the recognition and peace she deserved. With the guidance of the paranormal investigator, they performed a final ritual in the hidden room. They read aloud Clara's last diary entries, acknowledging her pain and suffering, and placed flowers and her favorite childhood toys around the room as offerings. They asked her spirit to rest, reassuring her that she was not forgotten and that her story would live on. As they completed the ritual, a warm golden light filled the room. Clara's spirit smiled, a look of peace and gratitude on her face, before slowly fading away. The oppressive atmosphere that had plagued the house lifted completely, replaced by a serene calm. The next morning, Emily and Jack left the house, feeling a sense of closure and fulfillment. They had faced their fears and uncovered the tragic history that had haunted their home. Clara's spirit was at peace, and they were free from the dark shadows that had once enveloped their lives. Their experience had changed them forever, teaching them the importance of understanding and respecting the unknown. They moved to a new home, carrying with them the memories of Clara and the knowledge that they had helped her find the peace she had longed for.